Taken from the classic book From Babylon to Timbuktu on page 104, chapter 6, and it reads, Many scholars call the inhabitants of North Africa barbers, but I shall not do so. I do not like this word barber. First of all, it is not a native word of Africa, therefore it is misleading. The Greeks and the Romans called the people of North Africa barbers, which means barbarians. However, the people of this region have their own names. The Greek historian Herodotus says there are 4 nations in Africa. 2 are indigenous, Ethiopians and Libyans. The Phoenicians and the Greeks are newcomers. I repeat, the Phoenicians and the Greeks are newcomers. Herodotus considered all the North African tribes to be of Libyans and all the Africans below the Sahara to be Ethiopians. And please keep in mind, the maps that are used today are not the maps that were used in antiquity. Ethiopia, Egypt, and these different regions had a much, much larger reach. They were not chopped up as they are now into so many different nations. There were not 52 or 55 nations in Africa during that time. And according to Herodotus, these are the 2 indigenous nations of Africa. The original inhabitants of North Africa were Hamites. These Hamites were black like the Egyptians, and this point has been proven by Herodotus. One thing that I would like to point out about the Hamites, at one time, all black people throughout the diaspora was considered Hamites, until it was discovered that the Hamites had created so many great civilizations, including that of Egypt and all of the pharaohs' tombs of the kings and the queens and all the greatness that the Hamites had created. Then all of a sudden, the Hamites became separated from black people, and not all black people were considered Hamites. After those discoveries, what hypocrisy! At the point that all of the great majestic buildings and tombs and artifacts and proof that these people were black Hamites were considered, then all of a sudden the confusion came and it was like, well, the Egyptians are not Hamites. You can't have it both ways. Either they were or they weren't. And not only that, but it was known as the land of Ham. So you tell me, were they Hamites or were they not? Again, from the book From Babylon to Timbuktu on page 106, and it reads, The language, which is called Hebrew Phoenician or Canaanite, was employed in the lands called Phoenicia, Palestine, or Canaan for over 1,000 years before the Arameans. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob came to Canaan. The Israelites lost their Aramaic language and adopted the Hebrew speech of the Canaanites. The Hebrew Phoenician merchants from the cities of Sidon and Tyre controlled the trade along the Mediterranean coast for more than 1,000 years before there were any economic treaties made with the Israelites. The Hebrew-speaking Phoenicians, Canaanites established their greatest city, Carthage, at Tunisia in North Africa. All the Canaanites were black people. I repeat, all the Canaanites were black people. Before we go into the next segment, I would like to say that we will be using the Bible to further prove our point of who these people were and who the land was in Northeast Africa. Now, we understand that many people don't believe in the Bible. I get it. But what I always say and what we talk about is that why is there so much confusion when it comes to the Bible? I don't think that this is an accident. Why are people fighting tooth and nail to maintain the identity of the people in the Holy Land? That alone draws suspicion.
Prior to building the Suez Canal in 1859 through 1869, the original African map extended to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This is contrary to maps of Africa today, which only show the main body of the continent as Africa with the Suez Canal as its northeastern border.
It is very important to know geography. The black line indicates the Tigris and Euphrates River, which extends much further north than the maps that we are given today, known as the maps of Africa. That portion was Northeast Africa prior to World War II. And it's still Northeast Africa.
The whole region that includes what the Bible calls the land of Canaan, Palestine, and Israel was an extension of the African mainland before it was artificially divided from the main African continent by the man-made Suez Canal. Second World War correspondents introduced the new name Middle East for the portion of the land separated from the African mainland.
Another argument we hear is that, these people who built those great civilizations, they weren't African. They were European. They were this, they were something else. My question is, where are all the great civilizations in Europe? Where are all the great tombs of the great kings and the great pharaohs in Europe? You mean to tell me you came thousands of miles away to build a civilization in the middle of Africa, but you didn't do anything in your original homeland? Yeah, right. I believe that.
Before the Second World War, the whole region now called Middle East was known as Northeastern Africa. Ancient Wagoons in the Bible journeyed from these regions to the mainland of Africa on foot. This can be referenced in the book of Genesis, chapter 46, verses 5 through 7.
Prior to the building of the Suez Canal, people quite often traveled from Egypt to Israel and back and forward by foot. It was not uncommon to make that journey on foot. This was prior to the attempt to separate Northeast Africa from Africa and call it the Middle East. Africa and Northeast Africa sits on the African tectonic plate. Israel is in Africa. This is a map of Africa pre-Suez Canal. If most people are asked the question, where is Israel? The answer will most likely be that Israel lies in the Middle East. However, what people today refer to as the Middle East is more accurately Northeast Africa.
Historians Flavius Josephus, Sallust, Plutarch, Tacitus, Eusebius, Diodorus confirmed that the original Hebrews were a group of Ethiopians and Egyptians who were forced to leave Egypt and migrate with their caravans on foot to this land which Canaan ruled, a land of Africans in Northeast Africa.
As stated earlier, it was not uncommon for people to walk by foot from Egypt into the Holy Land. And Jesus was born in Bethlehem, which is present-day Palestine, the Holy Land.
This is the land of Africa where Abram lived for 10 years and married Hagar, the Egyptian. The borders of this land that Canaan and his African descendants lived in and ruled, according to the Bible, extended from Sidon as thou comest to Gerar unto Gaza, and goest unto Sodom and Gomorrah, and Admah and Zeboim, even unto Lasha.
We cannot emphasize enough how important it is to know geography, to know where these places are, because without knowing where they are, they're just names. But when you have geography and when you know the location of these places, it puts a whole new awakening on where these places were. And once you know that, you know for sure that this was Northeast Africa, and no one could tell you different. You cannot be fooled.
This is the land that was known as Northeastern Africa. Those who may still be in doubt that the Canaanites were Africans and that the land of Canaan was African, let us turn to the Bible again to establish who Canaan and his descendants were. The Bible, Genesis chapter 10, verse 20, says the sons of Ham and their families, countries and nations, which they lived in and were ruled were Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. Ham is an African man in the Bible. His sons cannot be white. Cush ruled the Sudan. Sudan is in Africa. It is called the land of Cush. Mizraim ruled Egypt. Egypt is also called Mizraim in the Bible and also the land of Ham. Psalms chapter 105 verses 23 through 27. Egypt is in Africa, not in Europe. Its people are Africans, not Europeans. Phut ruled the whole land known today as Libya. Libya is in Africa, not Europe. The Libyans, excluding the Arabs there, are the descendants of Phut, son of Ham, an African in the Bible. His descendants are Africans, not white. Canaan is the son of Ham, an African. The land he ruled was named after him as the land of Canaan. It is in northeastern Africa, not Europe. His descendants are named after him as Canaanites in the Bible. They are Africans.
You know, folks, I find it so interesting how the Most High saw fit to plant diamonds, gold, silver, oil, natural gases, uranium, platinum, copper, cobalt, iron, cocoa beans, sugar, salt, petroleum, tropical timber, tropical fruit, lions, all types of foods, tigers, monkeys, all types of exotic animals only found on the continent of Africa. Yes, and so many different peoples and cultures and civilizations in Africa, including Northeast Africa. And when you stop to think for a minute, the oil in what is known as the Middle East today, that is oil that was planted there by the Most High. And those lands are black lands. Those are black people's lands. So it's no wonder in the Bible when he said, "Thou art rich." We are rich. We only need to realize it and turn from our wicked ways and turn back to the Most High. Yes, all planted in Africa, including the Fertile Crescent. This is the boomerang-shaped region of the Middle East that was home to some of the earliest human civilizations, also known as the cradle of civilization. This area was the birthplace of a number of technological innovations, including writing, the wheel, agriculture, and the use of irrigation. All in Northeast Africa. Now we know that the names of these lands have been changed so many times. It is important not to be confused when you hear names like Iran, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, United Arab Emirates, Yemen, Syria, Palestine, which was originally the land of Canaan, Jordan, Egypt, Canaan. These are all the Holy Land. These lands have so many different names. It was known also as the land of Shem, but it is known today as the Middle East, and we call it what it was, Northeast Africa. And the original inhabitants of those lands, make no mistake about it, were black people. I don't care if you call them Ham or Shem or black people, they were black indigenous people of that land. So the inhabitants of that land today, they are not the original people. They are mixture, an admixture, but the original people, again, they were black people. And don't forget, the colonizers of this world, they spread their seed throughout this entire world. That's like going to Australia and saying, yeah, the original Australians are the ones who are there now. No, it's not. Or the original Americans are the ones who are here now. No, it's not. The same thing that happened throughout the entire world is the same thing that happened in Northeast Africa, the so-called Middle East. Blanqueamiento. This is a social, political, and economic practice used in many post-colonial countries throughout the entire planet to whiten up the lands and remove the indigenous peoples of the land. This happened in Northeast Africa. So the people that you see today in those lands are not the original indigenous people of those lands. They're just not those people. Those people were black people, and whether you like it or not, the facts are the facts. And the Middle East is none other than Northeast Africa. And this is why we say the Middle East was stolen from Africa. The Black Excellence and Abundance channel, where Black history is every day. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And remember, thou art rich.